Hello, hello, Loving Without Boundaries community. We had a few tech problems, but I am really excited to be here with ElReco Ramon, who has agreed to be a guest, and we're going to talk about all the amazing things that they are doing with their life. So I'm really excited to have you here and to have what I think is going to be a really lively conversation. So thanks for taking time out of your busy life to be here to talk with us today.
Yeah, thank you too, Kitty. I really do appreciate you allowing me to use this platform. So, been very gracious. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Well, it's great to meet you. Thanks for navigating some of the tech issues that we were having. And I'd love to just ask you to maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself in your own words, keeping in mind that our community we're coloring outside the lines of heteronormative monogamy, and people are really looking to live their most authentic lives here. So, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about you and why you think this conversation could be beneficial for that audience.
Yeah, sure. So, as you said, my name is ElReco Ramon. Nickname is Ghost. My name has been Ghost for like 20 something years now. Been in radio broadcasting for over 20 something years. So, that's where the nickname comes from. Originally from Louisiana, around wah-shuh-taw Parish, and it's pretty much right around some of the most ancient mound building sites, which is Poverty Point and Watson Break, and also have origins of my family in Quachita Parish, Red River Parish, Natchitoches Parish. So Louisiana is home, definitely by by near and by far. But grew up a military brat, as they say. Still don't really understand what actually that means, but it's interesting because that definitely segues into my nomadic journey because I definitely have a solo nomadic lifestyle also. And regarding the authentication of my companionships and my arrival there and stuff like that, as we'll dive deeper into that. I've been polyamorous for about 5 to 6 years. Um, and I would say the quote unquote humble beginnings of that probably started showing up in my teenage years, early 20s, due to a number of things that a number of us have gone through regarding infidelity, stuff like that, conditioning, indoctrination, and it's just been a wild journey ever since. But yeah, that's just a little bit pieces of who I am at this present moment.
Oh, well, thank you for sharing all that, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. The gentleman who does the sound for the podcast, he lives a nomadic lifestyle as well, so I've been fascinated with that. How
Yeah.
I'm curious, how long have you been living a nomadic lifestyle then?
Yeah, so 2020, that's when COVID began.
Mhm.
And I remember like back in like I think like 2010 or 2011, like a supervisor of mine asking me like, what do you want, And I was like, man, I want to just be like remote, and I want to just be able to be free, and be around my family as close as possible. So in 2020 happened when COVID happened. Basically, I saw this portal opening for lack of words, and everybody pretty much had to go home. And I think pretty much after a month, I was like, I think my lease was up in August of 2020, and that was around March or April. So I think right middle of April, I was like, wait a minute, I think I'm not going back for a while. So I think I'm going to go ahead and disappear from the lifestyle of residential apartment living, and I ended up getting me a RV, a teardrop RV, and basically since August of 2020 to now, I've been solo nomadic with my two dogs and my RV trailer. Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. So basically living in an RV with your dogs?
Yeah, so I pretty much cover the southern corridor of things. I would travel a lot more places, but I have a Divine FJ Cruiser, which I love. That's my toy. Nevertheless, my FJ Cruiser is 2008, so I'm trying to preserve my truck as much as possible. So unfortunately, I haven't been able to travel everywhere around the country,
Right.
but yeah, pretty much I hang around Atlanta, North Georgia. I'm in the mountains quite a bit in Appalachians, Tennessee.
Wow.
I hang out with my family in Atlanta or Orlando, and if I'm not in any of those places, I'm in Mississippi, close to where my land is, or or Alabama. Depends on
Wow,
how.
that's quite a bit of traveling. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I'm happy for you that you're getting to enjoy that free
Thank you.
style living.
Thank you.
My husband recently got a van that he's converting. We
Hmm.
have a friend that's been living out of his van for about 4 or 5 years, and he inspired my husband. So we're still, it's a project that we're working on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'd love to ask you, you touched on it a little bit, but I love to ask what I call the light bulb moment for you. Like,
Hmm.
when was there maybe like a moment or a series of moments where you realized that maybe you weren't going to be living a traditional lifestyle, whether we're talking about having residential living or you mentioned like the cheating, which eventually led to polyamory. Like, was there like a couple different moments in your life when you thought, I'm not like the average person. I'm a little bit different, you know? What comes
Yeah.
to mind?
Yeah. So, and as I begin to basically layer all this out, part of what I do and why I do what I do as a, I would say, a poly historian is, studying to show myself approved in so many ways. And really it does start at conditioning and the indoctrination of it all. So just like most of us, at a certain age in a certain era, conditioned to be monogamous, whether through environment or whether through religion, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I remember being around 2014, 2015, 2016, just being a young teenage boy and just desiring, just loving to be around multiple women. And it wasn't even about, sex, for example, or physical intimacy. It was really just about observance, about intrigue, and it was natural, and I just enjoyed it. Nevertheless, I still was like, well, you can only be one, so don't get too ahead of yourself. So going up, fast forwarding to my early 20s, I just started in the radio industry. So for those of you that don't understand the radio industry, it is a leg of the entertainment industry. And sometimes what comes along with the entertainment industry is the at that particular point in time, what I would perceive as the luxury of having the freedom to be around a lot of women, for example. So my first ex fiance basically was around that moment. And I remember having like at least 2 or 3 moments of infidelity, even to the point to where I remember one time I had just finished being with someone, and I got to the house and I just remember just being in tears. And I'm like, what is going on? Why is this in me? Why am I doing this? It makes me feel terrible inside. Not that I'm with another woman, but that I can't really convey this to this individual because I'm supposed to be monogamous and we're supposed to be getting married at some point.
Oh, yeah. Mm.
So yeah, as far as like, the breaking of traditional matters, for many years I would go on and be more disciplined, and there wouldn't be any issues of infidelity. But around pretty much 2018, 2019, I was in a monogamous relationship, and partway through that relationship I was like, this is still a part of who I am. This is who I want to be. And I was very confident and respectful in expressing that to who my partner was at the time. And I didn't hold back. I shared it. I said, this is where I'm at. This is what I want to do, what I'm going to do moving forward. And that was the end of traditional relationships for me, basically.
Okay. And at that time, were you already understanding the word polyamory and what that was? Like, so did you identify that way?
No. So I I may have heard of the word. I honestly cannot even tell you that I knew what it was then. I feel like the word polyamory more so started showing up maybe over the last 3 years, because matter of fact, just kind of bringing back the solo nomadic journey into the conversation, I believe it was really around that time, and when I had started to meet new people was when I was like, okay, I know this word now, and that's what I am going to subscribe to, quote unquote, right?
Mhm.
And I would say even then, it was still the standard way of viewing companionships. Like I just had this overall look of the word poly being multiple and amory being love, and that was it. And I think there was still these rules I was still pretty much playing by. Um,
Mm.
and the only reason I expressed that is because it wasn't until this year,
Oh,
literally this
wow.
year, when I came across the labels polymono, which is multi-monogamous or ambiamorous, solo poly, metamorphs. Like I had no idea. And when I came across those words, it blew my mind because that was really the gates opening up for me to be like, wait a minute, like I really can choose how I want this to go and what I want to create. And that's what I'm all about now. I'm all about create new love, control your own narrative, basically.
How beautiful. How beautiful. So, and thanks for being really vulnerable to
Yeah.
sharing that journey with us.
Hmm.
And when you had that candid conversation, did that mean the end of that relationship as well? Is that when you express like, hey, this is who I am, this is how I want to move forward?
No, it actually didn't. She was overstanding, as I like to say. I mean, I'm not gonna sit up and say like she was overjoyed.
Right. Right.
It was kind of one of those things of like I still love you no matter what, and I take you for who you are, and I'm gonna rock with this. And again, bringing up another phrase that I never knew about, that was actually the beginnings of this thing called DADT, which at the moment I probably called it more so out of sight, out of mind. And
Mhm.
that was a choice from my partners. That was not like a decision or a quote unquote a rule that I made. It was kind of like, and as I would move forward in relationships, it was like, what do you want? What are the consensual and mutual agreements and compromises that you are comfortable with? And that was the setup of it all. So we stayed together for a while, but unfortunately, due to distance and surrounding
Mm.
circumstances and other variables, we just kind of ended up parting ways. And I still love her no matter what. I still do.
Mm, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. And
Hmm.
just for anybody listening, DADT
Hmm.
generally stands normally for don't ask, don't tell, or like you said,
Hmm.
out of sight, out of mind, just in case folks were wondering what that means.
Right.
And so tell me a little bit more about maybe what were some of the different challenges that you experienced as you were kind of stepping into this world that you've been discovering even up until
Mhm.
this year, and maybe how you overcame them.
Yeah. I believe the biggest challenge. So again, going back to like standards or what one might express as ethics, um, just understanding who I am and where I fit in this, what I like to call this poly galaxy, because
Mm,
that's really what it is. A lot of times on my platforms, various things I do and postings center around us being a non-monolithic type of people, whether it's just us as multi-cultures or in general, my culture in general, as we might say, quote unquote, the Black culture or indigenous culture as it pertains to ancient or indigenous Americas or Africa. We are non-monolithic and we're multi-tribal. So just learning that there's multi-tribalism within the umbrella of polyamory. So I bring up that example because I was in a relationship actually more recently, and I was noticing these different things about myself. And again, not knowing what solo poly or polymono is, but it was all already well known throughout the duration of that relationship that I had these aspects of solo poly in me, or these aspects of polymono in me. And as it is written in my book, it was early on in that relationship where it was like, what's interesting, I know you're polyamorous, but you have a monogamous nature. And like I said, I thought that just kind of made me chuckle inside. I didn't even subscribe to it. I was just like, I hear you, but all I know is polyamory, so whatever. You know what I mean?
mhm, mhm,
So, yeah, that was like, some of the difficult challenges is not being able to say that up front. It's still, there's still healing going on
mm,
within myself and my spirit and my heart, regarding that relationship, because I believe I inflicted pain not being able to be clear about what I now know is I am solo poly, I am multi-monogamous rather, I am a bit of asexual poly, et cetera, et cetera. And had I known these things and said these things up front, either the relationship would not have happened in the first place and we would have been great friends,
Mhm.
or she would have known these things clearly, and those would have been things that would not have had a part in the dismantling of that companionship, among other things. So, and that still hurts today,
Mm.
but yeah, that's some of the challenges I've gone through regarding the
Wow.
thing. Yeah.
Well, thank you for letting us basically witness your journey. Like you're being really vulnerable and courageous here. And
Yeah.
I often say, I'm a former cheater.
Yeah.
Before I understood what the word polyamory was, I cheated for like 12 or 14 years because I didn't know any other way to be at the time.
Yeah.
I'm older than you. So this is back in the day. Like
Mhm.
at some point that the word polyamory it didn't even exist yet. So, but I often say, like, when we know better, we do better. So
Yeah.
you've been learning and growing, and I've never actually until today heard the term multi-monogamous, which I
Yeah.
think you're kind of referring to as polymono. When I hear polymono, I think of a polyamorous person who's in a relationship with a monogamous person. But I
Hmm.
want to hear how you're relating to that terminology and the term multi-monogamous. Can you
Yeah.
enlighten us?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. So basically, it's the same thing. Again, when I was pretty much within the concepts of writing the book, and I knew I wanted it to be called multi-monogamous. That's pretty much around when I came across those labels, and I read the definition of polymono, and I was like, wait a minute, this sounds like multi-monogamous, So just kind of giving, and that's in my book also, just giving an example where it shows up at first was I'm in Philly at the time. I think this is around 2018, 2019. And I meet this young lady, beautiful young lady, again, so I still love to this day. And I just remember in my introduction to her, I knew in my mind that I needed to establish from the jump that, listen, I am not monogamous. So don't walk into, your
Mhm.
feelings with me, wanting this to be a certain way, because it's not probably going to work. But I just remember one day just sitting out on a bench talking with her, and I think we had known each other for a week or two by that point, and I knew it was time to basically express that. So it was funny because at the introduction of that conversation, I was like, you know how men usually tell you things that you want to hear? So I'm probably about to tell you things that you don't want to hear. And that's when I broke out into I am polyamorous, and this is how I've been, and blah 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 blah. And I could tell kind of by her face, it kind of was like a, kind of let her heart down a little bit. And I was totally fine with that, because I was like, I'd rather be a really good friend of yours, and us have a truthful, transparent relationship than you be told lies and be in love with me, in love with the wrong person. But
Mhm.
I told her, and that was like the beginning of me being a polyamorous individual, being with someone who was considered monogamous. And as time would go on, yeah, she would still be monogamous. I believe there were moments where she would engage in other relationships, which I was actually okay with, as she was much younger than I was. But
Mhm.
I was very receptive to who she was and her development and her evolution. And from that point on, again, with me just having this monogamous nature, I just meet monogamous individuals. And again, I don't go looking for monogamous women or anything like that, but it just happens to cross my path, and I'll have meetups or conversations, and I'll say who I am. And sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes these relationships move forward.
Mhm. Okay. And just to make sure I'm understanding it from your perspective, so when you say multi-monogamous, you mean you're identifying more as solo polyamorous,
Yeah.
yet you keep meeting and engaging with more than one people that identify as monogamous. Is that right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
And just to be clear too, at the inception of these relationships, they're meant to be lifetime partnerships. I want to make it clear, I'm not just meeting monogamous women that want experiences. Now, whether that's a part of the motive or agenda, I'm not aware of. But for the most part, I'm pretty sure that's not. But I am a life partner type of individual. I'm not
Mhm.
really into, a lot of flings and no judgments, by the way. But yeah, just to be clear, like, yeah, that's
Yeah.
the way I start these companionships.
That's amazing. Yeah, thanks for sharing just that viewpoint. I just want to make sure I was understanding.
Hmm.
So when I'd love to hear a little bit more, like, when did you realize, wow, I think I should write a book?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. So I definitely want to give a shout out to a great friend of mine named Butterfly. Butterfly is someone who I met in Philly. 'Cause I used to live in Philly. I know you used to live in
I
Philly.
did, yes. Mhm.
Um, and I remember when I first met her, again, just being transparent, I didn't know what to expect out of that relationship in particular. And she's someone that I adore and love also.
Mhm.
But I just remember, being upfront about, I'm polyamorous. I have 3 ex fiancés and blah, blah, blah. And she was just intrigued and glued to everything I was saying. And she was like, you should write a book.
Ah,
So that wasn't the first inception. I had been wanting to write a quote unquote relationship book ever since probably 2005. I was living in Huntsville, Alabama. Had a really good friend by the name of Sid, and we would talk about relationship issues and whatever experiences we were coming across. And we both were like, yeah, we gotta write a book one day.
mhm,
Um, the only reason I didn't write a book then was I believe I felt like I was too young and I hadn't experienced enough, which
mhm,
isn't necessarily true because I feel like no matter how young you are, you do have something to offer and contribute, especially to your peers.
mhm.
And second to that, I felt like I just like had, I don't know, so many failures at that point. And I was like, how can I write a book about relationship success or whatever? And like I'm quote unquote a failure at relationships when ironically failure is a success within itself. If you're, especially if you're growing from it, you're making the same
Yeah.
mistakes over and over again. That's debatable.
Mhm,
But yeah, 2018, 2019 is when basically the thought was really rolling around. And then when my relationship ended with the other individual recently, pretty much at the beginning of this year, that was basically the door to healing because I was writing for therapy. And as I was writing for therapy, I
oh,
knew that this was going to be a book and it needed to be a book. And lastly, I will say regarding the book, um, yeah, kind of going back to what I was just saying, circling back around to when I said that I wish I was able to express these things early on.
mhm.
I was like, I'm going to write a book that's so that no one or anybody I meet, no one can be like, I didn't really know clearly who you are, who you are. I
Oh,
was like,
smart.
no, there's a book that says exactly who I am in the present moment. It might change tomorrow or next year, but there's a book that expresses now clearly, where I'm at basically.
Wow, yeah, so it sounds like over the course of time, you came from a place where you were cheating and you didn't know how to handle that to now
Hmm.
where you really value, like, integrity and honesty, and you're like,
Yeah.
"It's out there. That's the way."
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because it's, one thing I've never had an issue doing is for obvious reasons, because I have 3 ex fiancés. I've never had a problem exiting a relationship was when it isn't right, and even though it can be viewed as a bad thing to have 3 ex fiancés, I get it, as we live in a world of duality and multiple perspectives. Nevertheless, I still was like, this can't go further for various reasons.
Mhm,
So yeah, I just knew, what I had to do, and
mhm.
this is where I'm at with it. Yeah.
Well, and that takes a lot of courage and guts and shows your growth,
Hmm.
over time as well. So, and I want to make sure I'm saying that the title of your book is Multi-Monogamous, 3 Ex Fiancés Later, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
So who would you say could benefit from reading your book? Like, who is this besides people knowing all about who you are when you wrote it? Um,
Hmm.
who do you think could benefit from reading it?
um I might be cliche, but I have to say everybody, right? I have to. I say, and I'll give a good reason for that. I say everybody, in particular, as me being a melanated being, or what one might call a black individual, a black male, um, and also one who believes to be indigenous to the Americas and Africa. I'm definitely also isolating indigenous individuals because a lot of what I do is based upon my research into deep antiquity. I love studying ancient and indigenous cultures. And one of the reasons why I love studying these cultures and how they interacted with reality as it pertains to nature, and that is one of the most important parts of the book. Anybody just listening right now, do understand that of course the book is about multi-monogamous as it pertains to my experiences and my journey, and even more importantly, it's an exploration, as I don't have all the answers and everything is a truth and a half truth. But a big and important part of this book is how indigenous and ancient people interacted with nature and how they observed nature to know how to walk with reality, as it pertains to their health, whether it was mental health, physical health, psychological health, their views on companionship. So, yeah, going back to the question, who can benefit? Anybody, if you want to know like where it all begins, like where does this begin? Where does the indoctrination begin? Where does the conditioning begin? Because one word I've been using among many in particular is the word permission. And it's interesting. I saw a quote that said, freedom is living without permission, and I like that, and I agree with that. In addition to that, I have another perspective, which was for me, which is freedom is also living with permission. And what I mean by permission is the permission that our ancestors gave us, which was a lot of times they didn't need permission to be who they needed to be in any given moment, whether it was their engagements in companionship, their dietary practices, how they worship, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of times we look to our ancestors for those things. So yeah, just dismantling and decolonizing, monogamy and the systematic way that we live. That's what this book is really all about. It's freedom, it's emancipation, it's liberation, it's the breakaway from all these modern traditional things that we subscribe to or are addicted to or blinded by, basically. I know it's a mouthful, sorry.
No, that was great. No, you really are very articulate, and you can tell the passion and the heart that you
Thank
bring
you.
to this. And I love what you said too. I actually do a master class here for our community, and there's 5 shifts I talk about to live your most authentic life, which sometimes means outside of monogamy. And the very first shift I have is to give yourself permission to live life by your own rules, regardless of what society says or conditioning says. So that really aligns a lot with the work that I do here. So I love what you said there about taking a nod from our ancestors, because they would sometimes just be living their best life and they didn't ask permission,
Right. Yes.
And I love also what you said about demantling and decolonizing that concept of monogamy that has been handed down, generation to generation. And, we're at a moment in time where there are more and more voices, which is why I love to do these interviews of people saying like, hey, monogamy doesn't quite work out for me. Doesn't mean monogamy is a bad thing to practice, but it's not working for me. And so I'm going to choose what it does work.
Yeah. That's what I love about your platform and your contributions to this area. I was listening to one of your interviews. I think it was normalizing non-monogamy, and I just remember this one part where you were speaking about how you grew up Catholic, and you were expressing that when you found out and you read the book, I think it was Ethical Slut, right? And you found out, like, wait a minute, there's a whole nother thing out here, and you were like, I was so angry, and to your point, like, this is why I do what I do. It's not just about my peers and my generation. It's about the younger generation. Like, you don't have to go through that. Like, you can start early, and you can start understanding yourself right now. And I just think it's beautiful that you do what you do, and I'm glad we're in this space to be able to dismantle these things.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah. And you did your homework. That's sweet. But one of them, I've done a lot of talks across the country, and I will tell you, my favorite talk I ever did was to the University of North Florida during their sex week, like a sex education week, in front of their LGBT and wider community. And it was a 3-hour workshop. And I was almost in tears because I said, it is such an honor to give this talk to you right now, because this is a talk that I wish somebody had given me when I was in school. You know, I could have saved myself and other people a whole lot of heartache and pain, just like you were saying earlier in the interview, because I had no idea there was this thing called polyamory. I could even give myself permission to discover that about myself. So I'm so glad that you get to hear this message today. So thank you too for writing your book, for being here and sharing your message and your voice, because the more voices, I believe, that speak their truth and their lived experience and how they've navigated through that pain, through that hurt, I think the more we can help other people to live their most authentic lives. So thank you for all the work that you're doing as well.
Oh, no,
Reach
very.
out to come talk to me.
Yeah, thank you. Very welcome.
Mhm.
Very.
I'd love to ask, when you were writing your book, what would you say was maybe one of the most challenging things about writing your book, Multi-Monogamous-3 Ex Fiancés Later? I love that title. And maybe the most rewarding thing about writing your book.
Oh my God, that's a good question. That's a good question. Um, You know, DADT is an interesting chapter. Again, that's like you said, don't ask, don't tell. I know that when it comes to ethics and morality, that we oftentimes have like this thing called poly police and and the poly ethics committee and stuff like that. And in this quote unquote echo chamber regarding social media, like so many point of views, and I guess my contribution to the echo chamber, so to speak, is based off of. So, for example, I did had a good conversation interview with Zaleka Clark Hepworth, and she talks about pluriversity or plurality, and the fact that we live in a realm where all perspectives are right and wrong. More than 3, 4, 5 things can be a truth simultaneously. So I say all that to say that everything has its cons and its pros. So when writing about DADT, I just wanted to make sure that I was definitely respectfully contributing what I needed to contribute to that conversation, as it's not just about people giving a pass to like basically cheat and hide things and have all this sex or whatever, like as I wrote in the book, like bad apples are in all forms of companionship, all forms, and don't get me started on the bad apples in monogamy. So DADT was slightly challenging. And I would say the most rewarding part, well, I was real quick, second to that challenge is writing about 3 ex-fiancés, because I was like, I don't want to put them on blast like that. You know what I'm saying? Like just being careful, not to really sensationalize. Like I said, I've been in entertainment industry for so long. This book is not about sensationalizing people or whatever like that. It has its points of high interest and stuff, and whatever. But yeah, just making sure that I was just paying homage to them, making sure it was very clear that these 3 individuals, among others, but these 3 divine individuals are part of what paved the way for me to be who I am. But rewarding was definitely the conversation and the writing on nature. I am infatuated with nature, not from a romanticizing point of view, because people do that often. Like, nature is just so beautiful. I'm like, nature is balanced. Be careful, you know. But just really just talking about my discoveries and my research thus far, as I still have a lot to learn, but my research thus far as it pertains to ancient traditional systems in Africa and the Americas and indigenous cultures and their relation with nature and how they observe nature and included it in their day-to-day habits.
Mhm. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today. And is there anything else you'd like to share before we start to just talk about where people can find your book and connect with you, that maybe you'd like to, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would say off the top of my head, there's a few words that come to my mind. We already talked about permission, and like you said, it really is all about you giving yourself permission, not me, not anybody else. Like I said, the ancestors' way of giving permission is them laying out the blueprint and the template of no permission, of you being able to create your love and your companionship and your reality the way that you want to create it. So that's one word that comes to mind. Another thing that comes to my mind is controlling your own narrative. When it comes to ethics and morality, let's be clear. You are the the god of your world and your reality. So create it how you want to create it, and control your narrative by making sure that you are communicating your ethics and morality with your partners, not with everybody around you. um,
Mm.
and let that be the guidelines and measurement of your morality and your ethics, respectfully speaking, and not harming others, of course. And the third thing I would say that comes to my mind is the word deflection. And the reason why deflection comes to my mind is because on this journey, especially if you're starting out on this journey or still in the middle in the process, because it is a long journey and maybe never ending. But when I say deflection, keep in mind that as you're learning these new things about yourself, be careful of the environment you're in and the people that you're sharing your lifestyle with. Everybody is not going to understand who you are. And the more you share with people that don't understand who you are and those that are conditioned and indoctrinated to be a certain way, it's going to make it really hard for you to get to that point that you want to get to in your relationships, because people have a way of tearing you down and of dismantling your train of thought, and they will have you thinking that your way of doing companionships is totally wrong and rooted in evil, and you'll be right back to where you started feeling awful. So those are the three things that come to my mind off the top of my mind. And yeah, like I said, this is really for everybody, but this is for my young adults that are just really getting into these things. Yeah.
Mm,
Hmm.
that's really, really beautiful, and I love that last thing that you were talking about, and I often use the phrase, like, to not, to protect your dream. There's those dream stealers out there.
Oh
So,
yeah.
and that's probably why I created this whole community and this mission here at Loving Without Boundaries, so people had a safe place with
Mhm.
other like-minded people who are gonna be like, "You be you," and cheerlead that. So, well, this conversation's just been really, really amazing. Where can people connect with you and find your book?
Yeah, so my book, Multi-Monogamous, where did I leave my book? Oh, it's over on the bed. My book is Multi-Monogamous. I'll go get it right there. Multi-Monogamous-3 Ex Fiancés Later, and that is on Amazon. And this is it right here. Um, the cover of the book is actually my own painting, so I thought it was really cool because I am a painter also. But it's on Amazon right now. You can order it there. You can also find me on social media at Multi-Monogamous. I have a podcast, two podcasts, one called Multi-Monogamous, where we have similar conversations. And I hope Kitty's going to join me one of these days on one of these episodes. I knew you would.
Absolutely.
So yeah, we have a lot of great conversations within the Poly Galaxy, and my other podcast is Normal LOL, which is basically a lengthy discussion of a lot of episodes about indigenous and ancient mental health practices. And lastly, I would say that even though I feel like it's important to connect with others, like I love, definitely follow me. I love engaging in conversations, but more importantly, I love talking. Like I just want to meet people and have these discussions. So if you have a bookstore in particular that you want me to come to, or any virtual groups or groups in your city or your town, like I said, I'm a nomadic solo RVer. So I'm in Georgia, like I said, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi pretty often. And if you want to just, connect with me, just DM me or email me at ElReco Ramon at hotmail.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for reaching out and being a beautiful voice in our community and sharing your story so vulnerably and courageously with us. And yeah, I'd be happy to have you ever back on. And I'm happy to connect with you to come on your podcast. Absolutely. I love to have conversations like this. So thank you for being you and for continuing on your growth journey.
Yeah, thank you. It would be such a pleasure. Like I'm very serious. It would be such a pleasure. Yeah. And if,
Awesome.
and again, like I said, thank you for your contributions too. We need as many people as possible speaking about these things, because The conditioning is horrific. So I appreciate you, Kitty.
You're welcome. I appreciate you too. And thanks for helping normalize the conversation and just again your honesty and your integrity and your courage in sharing your story. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
All
Appreciate it.
right. Take care. Appreciate you too. And
All right.
thank you for everyone who's been listening in. We appreciate you and we're happy that you're here. All right. Talk to you soon.
Peace, peace.